We are at 6 o'clock. If everyone is ready, we'll get started. So welcome to our June 10th council meeting. We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Tukanaha, the Sinites, the Silks people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. So we're called to order at 6 p.m. And there is one late item. Because I just got back last Tuesday from Ottawa, I didn't have my report in by the deadline. So that is a late addition if council would be agreeable to adding that. So the motion is that the agenda for the June 10th meeting be adopted as amended with the late item. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Leithwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? Carried. And adoption of the minutes of the May 27th meeting, if there's no errors or omissions. Motion moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favor? It's carried. We have no delegations. So then we have council reports, and as indicated, my report has been provided as a late item. And you know, you may not have had a chance to read it, but if you want to afterwards and ask any questions, or if you did have a chance to, and you do have questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair. First of all, congrats on 5 years on the FBM.
Oh, thank you.
In the report was one of the discussion was rural access for health care. I just wondered what that looked like, or if they've gotten that far.
No. It's one of the items that they're going to be working on as with the new rural package that they're putting forward to the federal government. So because government just formed, so
right.
It's one of our advocacy pieces. So that'll be probably in October that will come up at our meetings.
Okay.
In Ottawa.
Great. Thanks.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I was curious about there was a resolution regarding the future of Canada Post. Can you give us a little information about the resolution?
I didn't post them in there, but again, they're looking at getting rid of small post offices. That happened a while ago, but they would like to ensure that Canada Post stays as an entity because rural communities depend on them. So that was brought forward by one of the local governments, and so that's adopted as FCM policy to make sure that the federal government maintains rural post offices.
Perfect.
Do any other members of council have anything to report this meeting? All right, so then we will move on to staff reports. CAO Baker. Oh, no, sorry. Committee meetings. So there is an information item, which is the meeting of the Arena Association. So that's just been received. Are there any questions for Councillor Leithwood on those minutes? Okay, now we're to CAO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Appreciate it. And thanks, Lee, for adjusting the camera there. It looks like it picks up our attendees and zooms in on them. So thanks for adjusting that, Lee. So just a few items. One item was, you might have heard of the Lapu Lapu Festival in the Lower Mainland. And so following that incident, there was a commission of inquiry into community event safety. And the village participated in a survey and provided some information because we have, large community events for a community of our size. And then they followed up and wanted to have a discussion with us a bit further to find out what kind of support the province could provide to smaller communities for events. And so we had a good discussion with them and certainly steered them away from legislative requirements or adding additional requirements to the village, and instead suggested that those requirements ultimately be provided to the event organizers. So just wanted to let council know that that discussion had occurred. And there was also, council recently asked for staff to look at possibly relocating the historical society within the Kemble building. So staff had a discussion with folks at the Kemble building and provided them with a temporary space that they can move into throughout renovations. And then we'll have to take a look at it again in the long run. And an update on the Recycle BC contract. Council might recall that earlier this year, the village signed a contract with Recycle BC. And so there's been some ongoing struggle to try to get our recycling contractor, North Kootenay Waste and Recycling, to be able to deliver the recyclable material to the Kaslo landfill. So that's been an issue because it's not set up to receive our recyclable material. Instead, the contractor has to drive to Trail to deliver the materials. So you can imagine that is a concern for the contractor because it takes a lot of time, and a concern perhaps from the a government perspective because of greenhouse gas emissions. And so staff are trying to work with the RDCK to encourage them to take a closer look at allowing our contractor to deliver the material either in Kaslo if possible, or possibly Nelson, Castlegar. Anything would be better than driving the 300 kilometers round trip. So want council to be aware that staff are trying to make progress on that. And on a happy note, we've received $150,000 in grant funding. It was announced from the province. Council was already aware, but that's for funding towards our source water protection plan and our flood and erosion mitigation plans. So official announcement came through recently. And staff also had a recent meeting with one of the stakeholders of the aerodrome. So you have to forgive me if we brought this up at the last meeting, but there is an opportunity for a spot at the aerodrome to be leased. And that means council has an opportunity to revisit its lease structures, just like for the aerodrome, just like it did for the thrift store as a commercial lease per se. So provides another opportunity for council to take a look at what we're doing at the aerodrome to try to increase revenues. And then the last update would be on our wastewater utility, so our sewer system. We've received a draft operational certificate from the ministry. So that's kind of an update on what our previous operating certificate looked like. And staff are going to meet with a qualified professional, an engineer, to figure out what those operational requirements might look like, and then get back to the ministry and try to work out exactly what the conditions of that permit might look like. And that's the CAO report. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO Baker. Are there any questions? Councillor Leaflet.
To the chair. When you say moving the Historical Society, do you mean the archives?
Sorry, say that again.
When you mentioned about the Kootenay Lake Historical Society moving and finding a temporary location, do you mean the archives?
Yes, my apologies. Yes, the archives in the basement looking to take a temporary place on the main floor.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, on the upper floor.
Okay. Big move. Thanks.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I see this is under 5.5 on the agenda, so maybe we'll be talking more about it a little later, and this is not the time, but you did mention the GRIF disaster resilience and innovation funding, and just curious, how will the grant be utilized? It does say on our own website that see further details on the website, but I couldn't find it. Will we be talking about this in next after correspondence?
Through the chair to Councillor Bird, the public so 5.5 is just to let council know that we've issued a public notice about the grant so that the public's aware we received it. Council would have become aware of the details of the grant most recently through our capital project discussion that happened a couple of months ago. So there's roughly um, we'll say roughly $70,000 going towards developing a source water protection plan. So that would be Kemp Creek and all of the water sources that come to the village. And then the other half of the grant is going to be used for looking at the Kaslo River and what do we need to do to ensure that we're prepared in the event of a flood or significant erosion along the banks. So that would kind of summarize what that project is, and maybe even though it might not come up in detail when we get to 5.5 on the agenda, I know that our manager of strategic initiatives was going to touch on it during his update on projects.
Any other questions for CAO Beaver? Thank you. All right, next we have correspondence. We have several items. Are there any items that individual council members would like to pull? They just, Councillor Birch, go ahead.
Through the chair. Yeah, there's a few, of course, there are many that are, in fact, maybe all of them related to South Beach. There's one from Ann Malik that where she's asking, will council hold a public hearing prior to the second reading of bylaw 1298? And so this question, procedural question that I have is there presume, like, there's every possibility that bylaw 1298 will be discussed by council and altered, like the idea that it will remain as drafted and from November 2024. Three. See how long it's been. The idea that it'll remain as drafted, I don't think is realistic. So the idea of holding a public hearing prior to council discussing, bringing it to second reading and therefore discussing it and most likely changing it doesn't seem to make sense to me. And just in terms of the way that our procedures, what follows what, but I get the idea, and it's certainly been several other letters referred to, a request for a public meeting of some sort, of open house of some sort. Last meeting, we talked to one of the letters from Russell Precious was about a risk benefit analysis. And hopping forward, there is a letter from the South Beach Working Group, and they make a point, which I accept, that without any kind of public input session or open house, this beyond the letters that we've received, that it's starting to endanger the public trust in village government. And I feel that, and I'm sure many of us do, that that trust is eroding, certainly in some sections of our residents. So as far as an open house goes, it strikes me as having an open house on disposition itself is not very useful, which is really the thrust of the letter. The thing about the disposition and the notice of disposition is it is accompanied by a whole host of terms and conditions. And I think an open house, talking about the implications and potentially finding out how we can get to a risk benefit analysis on each of the terms and conditions in the purchase and sale agreement, which is the background of the disposition, would be more useful than having an open house that targets the disposition itself, or an open house that targets bylaw 1298 in isolation. So these are the thoughts that I've had in response to those letters, that an open house requires looking at more than just disposition and more than just bylaw 1298, but the ramifications of what is involved in a disposition, because there are so many terms and conditions that are associated with the disposition. And if any of those are not satisfied by us or by the proponent, then it doesn't go ahead.
And regarding 1298, in my response to the terms and conditions, I put in a couple of things that I think do need to be amended in bylaw 1298. And we're at a spot where we can do that, right? Because we haven't gone to third reading. And even if we had gone to third reading, it could be rescinded and we can go back to second and we'd still be able to make amendments. So that is not off the table. So we don't really have anything to go to a public meeting with at this time that would be concrete, because we're still working on it as council. And at our last council meeting, we were to give our input, and then we'll have a committee of the whole meeting where we will discuss what, as council, we want to include in the terms and conditions. So it's still a work in progress. So there's nothing to my view, that, like you said, that we can go to a public meeting with at this time. But CEO Baker, did you have any further input?
Perhaps just to let council know that send staff your commentary with respect to the purchase and sale agreement, and then staff are going to pull it all together, probably have a conversation with their lawyer to get some guidance and thoughts on what they think. There might be a meeting between council and our lawyer to explain kind of any legalities, if there's any of those types of questions that council has. And then, as Mayor Hewitt points out, get back together with council, reach a consensus on what you want the terms and conditions of the agreement to be, go back to the lawyer and verify where everything fits into the process, i.e. agreement or bylaws. And yeah, so I think both what Mayor Hewitt and Councillor Bird said are valid.
Were those all your items?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I actually have quite a few items. I'd like to pull the correspondence from Jean-Marc Laflamme, Anne Malik, Russell Precious, Jesse Spears, Rhonda Gates, Kit Ashenhurst, Andy
Second.
Okay.
So the first one, and
First one
there's
is-
several from
And
Anne.
then, so Anne Malik, and
Malik.
Anne Malik, specifically referencing, ensuring that there are no off-season storage of RVs, decks, or temporary covers, that correspondence. Russell Precious, about the risk-benefit analysis. Jesse Spears, about a cost-benefit analysis. Rhonda Gates, about a referendum. Kit Ashenhurst, about the implications on our medical system. And Andy Shadrack, on his requested documents and as to whether he had received those. And then both Sarah Keenan and Laura Douglas have similar a topic, which is just an open house meeting for the public. So I'd like to discuss each one of those.
Okay, we'll start at the top.
Okay. So for Mr. Laflamme, I would like to see microhomes considered as a solution to affordability and environmental considerations when we're looking at Kaslo South. That's, he said quite a bit, but I do think that it is worth looking into what that would look like in Kaslo South and whether or not that could be a piece of the puzzle.
Can I ask you, did you submit that to the consultant?
I submitted it to yourself and the CAO to send on to the consultant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And if there's no further discussion, I can move to the next one. For Anne, I think it's important, I mirror her concern. And I think it's important that when we're looking at conditions and we're looking at things that we set up, that we ensure that there's no off-season storage of RVs or decks or temporary covers. Because there seems to be some contradiction between what has been suggested and what is kind of in our bylaws and OCP. So
Are those items that, again, have you submitted those
I have.
to staff? Okay,
Yes.
so, and I think so I'll clarify with you, CAO Baker, will that meeting, will it be a meeting that the public will be at? I'm just wondering, because if we're gonna go through each of those things, because I've also submitted some of those same things to CAO Baker, whether we'll be going through them at another meeting and looking at the whole package versus just going through the correspondence right now. Just recognizing that we do have a presentation, but not to cut you off, but if there are things that we will be able to discuss in an open meeting in more detail at another time. CAO Baker?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Any information that council wants to consider as part of the purchase and sale agreement, if it's sent to staff from councilors, then it'll be included in the discussion. I don't believe we would go in camera to discuss those conditions unless it was something to do with negotiations. So it would all occur in an open meeting.
So, yeah, so that one's already on the radar. Thank you.
As many may be, so I'll try to be brief on each one of them so we can respect our delegation. And for Russell Precious, I believe that a risk benefit analysis in order prior to any land transfer being completed is in order, and that it be a condition of the land transfer and that it be done by an independent third party. For Jessie Spears, in addition to the risk benefit analysis, she also suggested that there be a cost benefit analysis, as we often hear that this is going to be an economic driver for our community and not an economic drain. I think having a cost benefit analysis would actually prove that out in a way where it wouldn't be so subjective, and we could actually have a better grasp as to whether or not this would be an economic driver in our community. I think that's important in addition to a risk benefit analysis. For the correspondence from Rhonda Gates, I do believe that a referendum is in order to determine community support for this project. The perception that over 200 letters sent to us in opposition is a vocal minority. I think that is folly. And I think a referendum could put this conversation to close and give council an actual understanding of support in terms of opposition and people who are for it without making inferences. From Kit Ashenhurst, I believe that their concerns about medical care in Kaslo being negatively affected by 70 seasonal RV sites is very relevant in any approval of this proposal. As this is the exact social impact that I foresee negatively affecting our year-round residents. So I think that would be a really important thing to understand deeper. For Andy Shadrack, he has requested documents to be pulled and sent to him. So through the chair for the CAO, I'm wondering if those documents have been sent. And I would actually also be personally interested in seeing these documents as well. So I'll pause there if the CAO is open to.
CAO Baker?
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, the documents have not been provided to Mr. Shadrack. We're not at that point in the process where that information has been exchanged between the developer and the village. So those documents have not been shared with anyone. They have not been developed.
Okay, developed. Okay, great. And then just, similarly, actually, the last item about an open house meeting, I understand the points that were made by Councillor Bird and the mayor and agree on those. So while at this point it might not be the most fruitful as there's not much to be able to move on. I would like to advocate for an open house and an opportunity for the public to speak with council without the developer necessarily being the proponent that guides all of that.
Ask a question for clarification.
Mhm.
You don't want your ideas not to have the developer there?
Not necessarily not to have the developer there,
Oh,
but not to, like, last engagement, they led that,
yes.
and that this would not be led by them. Yeah.
Councillor Lee could.
To the chair. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about some of what you said. So first of all, a referendum does cost a fair amount of money.
Mhm.
It's not inexpensive. And so we have to really bear in mind what we are asking the taxpayers of Kaslo to pay for.
Mhm.
I mean, I think we're all aware and cognizant of how people feel. And, you know, yes, we've had a lot of letters, but it's the taxpayers of Kaslo that would pay for a referendum. So not all of the letters would be people that are writing and are impacted by that. So, you know, some of the things that are being suggested, like cost benefit and economic, again, like we have to be very aware of what we are expecting the taxpayers to pay for.
Mhm.
The point about, you know, if it goes further and possibly our health centers, taxes like hospital tax and police tax are paid for. So the people that are paying taxes or the owner of the property that are paying taxes, they pay hospital and police tax. So they are entitled to those services.
Mhm.
So, and then I did actually suggest to council that after one of our meetings that we have some kind of citizen advisory group that we could invite certain people to the table when we do talk about the terms and conditions to get sort of a representative of all the different perspectives. So I still think that would work as an idea rather than having many public members. I think we could pick out 3 people that would be representative of all 3 opinions, and we could get some honest feedback. So that's another way that we could get public input.
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair. So I agree with much of what you said. When you're talking about, that they are through their taxes paying for our medical. So that's not necessarily something that I'm debating, but it's more about the capacity that our health system can handle. Whether it's being paid for or not right now, sometimes it could take 2-3 weeks to be able to get an appointment. And that could grow, quite a bit when we have that seasonal influx at our busiest time. And I am aware that the referendum does cost our taxpayers. But I think that this project is so important in terms of what the future of our community looks like, that I feel like this is a situation that a referendum is built for, so that we can gain more understanding. Because right now, we have 200 plus letters that are against, and we have, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 30. I'm not quite sure what the exact number is, but I know it's probably less than 25 for. And there's, no clear understanding beyond our personal, thoughts as to how much support there is for this project, or how many people are actually against it. And like you say, that are living in our village as opposed to in the region. And this would give us an actual clear understanding where we're not supposing based on our, social groups, what our community actually would want. And I think that it would be money well spent, and that the social implications and the financial implications down the road for this project are significantly larger than the cost of a referendum.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah, just a couple comments through the chair. I think Councillor Brown is overstating his case a little bit. What we're talking about here is an RV park with a potential for 70 sites and an average of 2 people per site. That's 140 people at full build out. Like full build out could take 5 to 10 years. I don't see the big rush of people coming to Kaslo to buy these lots. So the impact on the community of an additional 150 people over the course of 5 to 10 years, I think is relatively negligible in terms of our healthcare system, our ability to service these people, effect on our water system. I think there's a lot of hyperbole going on here that it's not necessarily called for based on the size of the project. That's all I have to say.
We were actually just raising correspondence. We weren't debating all of the items, but I'll let you have one more comment, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Through the chair. I think, a statistic such as only 2 people per RV is, I'd wonder where that number came from, because I've also seen numbers of 4. It seems very subjective. So I hesitate to say that 140 people would be that number. I think that's where we can actually, through this risk and cost benefit analysis, is come up with more concrete statistics, as opposed to me saying it's 4 or you saying it's 2, or kind of guessing at it. But I think that the real fact is we don't know.
Right. Thank you for that lively discussion of our correspondence. So we'll move on to the public notice. Yeah, now, disaster. Can you, I'll go to our manager of strategic initiatives.
As mayor, I believe it's a disaster resilience infrastructure fund.
Infrastructure. I thought the name that Councillor Bird read out was not quite right, but I couldn't remember the word. You didn't say infrastructure, you said something else, but.
Innovation.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that actually, Councilor Bird might be. I am. I'll assume that.
Yeah. It's not calling it up. Interesting. So Councillor Bird, you had some further discussion?
Point of order, maybe our manager of strategic initiatives could pull up a chair at the table if he's gonna be talking about this, rather than speaking from way back there where I'm not sure.
Well, I think the more fulsome discussion happened regarding in the project update, which is
Okay.
item 7.2.
Okay.
So to have him come up and explain it now and then explain it again later as part of that package might be a little more than we need to do at this point. So are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then that brings us to question period. Just going to expand the screen here for the online participants. See them as well. All right. Are there any questions? So go ahead, Anne. So it's 6:33 and I'll watch. We'll allow 15 minutes as usual.
Is there an estimated date when the public can expect to see the notice of disposition published?
Did you hear that, CAO Baker? Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. There's no estimated date. I wouldn't want to provide misinformation, so it'll be out as soon as we can get it pulled together.
Any other questions? If you're online and you have a question, you can, there's not many, so I might see a real hand, or you can use the raise hand function. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone online at this point. Anyone else in the room? Okay, Russell, go ahead.
Let me just stand or?
Whichever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Mayor Hewitt, councilors. I do have a question, but if you will bear with me, a brief preamble to my question. I wrote this out, so I'm gonna read a script.
Can I just check, can you hear CAO Baker? Can you hear, Mr. Precious? Okay, good. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure in case there's a question that he needs to answer, so you don't have to repeat. Okay.
I would suggest that the South Beach decision is challenging because it will have such an enormous impact on our small community. But I would say that what makes the decision hard is that council has not been provided with the range and depth of information necessary to make an informed decision. The information that has been shared by the developers' professionals is easily one-sided. And that goes for legal opinions as well. For instance, our legal counsel, who is considered one of the leaders in civic law in BC, concluded, and I quote, I've shared this with you before, but I quote her, either bylaw 1298 has to be amended to be consistent with the OCP, that is, to only permit a seasonal campgrounds RV park and not the sale of strata lots for long-term residential use, or the OCP has to be amended to permit what the developer is really trying to do, which is sell strata lots that would allow the owners to reside in their RVs for up to 8 months of the year. In the latter case, the village would have to hold a public hearing and give the residents of Kaslo a right to be heard before the OCP amendments and rezoning bylaws are adopted. End of quote. It is too easy to end up with the fox designing the chicken coop. So the key is to obtain an objective assessment. And I don't think it is going too far to suggest the staff was negligent in the past in not calling for a risk benefit for a project of this magnitude. In exploring this topic with Molly last week, Molly met with Laura and myself for, I don't know, seemed forever, 2 hours. In exploring the topic with Molly last week and asking who one might engage to take this on, John Kaslo's name was raised as a candidate. And in speaking with him yesterday, he was quite intrigued by the idea. Of course, there are serious professionals, groups who do this as their primary work. One can reference the Government of Canada's Canadian Cost Benefit Analysis Guide, and there's a host of options there. And one would expect John, if he were to take this on, to draw on the expertise there to structure such an endeavor. So my question is, not unlike 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, many weeks ago, will you please consider this? I will make a more formal request in a letter this coming week. I believe this will satisfy both you in your decision-making and also the citizens of Kaslo, who will see a process they can trust.
Thank you. So we'll wait for your formal correspondence. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, I see Laura online.
I guess it's a procedural question. Thank you for taking my question. So when items come up for discussion from the correspondence and then you discuss it, how does any action get taken forward? Would a counselor have to make a motion later in the meeting or at a different meeting? Or like in terms of the referendum, or does it just die now that it's been discussed and is taken care of? What's the procedure?
A council member would have to make a notice of motion because those are items of correspondence. They're not business items. So a notice of motion, I think, would be probably the most appropriate, and it would come to a subsequent meeting. I'll look to CAO Baker for confirmation, but that's how I believe it would be dealt with.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Maybe just further to that, probably makes sense for all discussion on the RV park proposal to occur within a committee of the whole when council's talking about the purchase and sale agreement. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, CAO Baker.
thank you.
All right, and then okay, Linda, I thought I saw another hand.
Thank you. I just wonder if council, I'm gonna be just straight out, if they feel somehow beholden to Dale Munro and QP development because of the length of time that's been put into this proposal that's pretty wishy-washy, I would say, because one moment it's a full ramp and one moment it's not. And anyhow, I was speaking with Dale after the last meeting. He and I had chatted for quite a while. And because he says there's absolutely no way that, two things, excuse me, he cannot do fewer than 72 sites because it wouldn't make good he won't do that. It doesn't make financial sense. And so because of that, it seems like council is wanting to try to accommodate him. So I was chatting with him and I said, we do have several donors, community donors, who would be glad to purchase it. And I said he could build his RV park maybe up at Brenton's area, which is, I would call an unsightly area, whatever the technical term is. And he could make it pretty and make it nice. And he said he would never sell it, not for $1 billion. So my question is council going out of its way to try to accommodate this proposal that is not, in my opinion, written up well and concretely, nor does council even have understandings fully, like what does strata mean, this or that. But is council feeling, and I'm racking my brain, I know there's a term, it's called something in the realty, like when you put so much time and effort and he's given it money, he's done the berm bit. Does council feel beholden to him? That's, I guess, my question. And I would say politically correct it is, but it's just straightforward. And I just wonder, because so much time and so money has gone into this. And I don't know. I mean, I know it's a hard one.
No. We are doing our due diligence, and otherwise we could have just decided when he first brought the proposal to us, we as council could have said, no, we're going to go for it. So it's been a long time and we know it's taking a long time and he knows it's taking a long time, but we are doing what we feel we need to do. We're not feeling pressured. I don't feel pressured by the developer to, if we were, we would be rushing to an answer. We could say today that yes, it's done. But we're continuing to take public feedback, and we have question period each time, and we entertain sometimes repetitive questions, which is okay, but everybody wants to be heard. But we just don't, within the confines of a meeting, which is our business meeting, we can't allow limitless questions. But no, I would say that, well, for my part, and I'm sure that none of the other council members are feeling like they're beholden to him to come up with an answer that is, there's going to be things that we put in our notes to the CAO that he may walk away. We just don't know. So we'll leave it at that, I think.
Respect,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And when Councillor Brown a few weeks ago had put forth the proposal to not, the motion to not go through with the proposal, and then it was suggested like, well, maybe we should let him come back. Instead of just a straightforward, nope, we don't accept the proposal, it sounded to me like as if there was this wanting to be an opening for Mr. Underwood to come forth with a second proposal, which he did, which isn't really any different, 72 sites instead of 19.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So, we move into our committee of the whole. So the recommendation is that council resolve itself into committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Leafwood and seconded by Councillor Byrd. So our regular meeting is recessed at 6:45. And what I'm going to suggest is we'll have our presentation from Dan again, who is the manager of community sustainability with the regional district of Central Kootenay for emergency management. And so we'll have a presentation and then we'll take a bit of a break before we go into our projects presentation. So welcome, Dan. And I'll let you further introduce yourself and you could tell everybody else a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you through the chair. My name is Dan Seguin, and I'm the manager of community sustainability at the regional district. And my portfolio includes all things to do with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So on that, tonight I'm here speaking about the disaster risk reduction side of things, which includes the emergency management program and all phases of emergency management. So preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. And within that, I'm also responsible for the Regional Emergency Operations Center. And usually when the EOC is activated, I'll take on one of the leadership roles, often the EOC or Emergency Operations Center Director. And also within my portfolio is FireSmart. So that's one of the other components to it. So thank you very much for having me. It's I really have been appreciating being able to speak directly to council about how we work together during emergencies.
So Leah's got it set up that you can share your screen if you would like.
Great. This is the wild card moment. We'll see if it works. So let me know if you're seeing a title looking slide with my name on it.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. Well,
We'll just take a moment down because the members of the gallery are turning their chairs around so they can see.
Perfect.
All right. Are you okay? Can you see from there, Bill? Are you okay? All right, we're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I've already introduced myself, so there we go, jumping in. And what I wanted to do tonight was give you an overview of what emergency management is and how there is that relationship between the village of Kaslo and the regional district when we do get into emergencies. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is to go through what emergency management is, so that emergency management 101, have a look at the guiding legislation that helps us understand what we're supposed to be doing as local authorities under the Emergency and Disaster Management Act, so under EDMA, and then talk a little bit about the roles and responsibilities that are shared between the Village of Kaslo and the Regional District when we have emergency, when any emergencies kind of arise. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time for questions. So before we get too much into the whole depth of emergency management with RDCK and Village of Kaslo, I wanted to do a quick kind of overview where we see there are 4 phases to emergency management, and that's preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. Sometimes mitigation and preparedness are flipped, but in essence, what we're looking at are 4 different phases. And when you think of emergency management, it's like if I was to summarize it in one sentence, it's the organized process of preparing for, mitigating, responding to, and recovering from disasters to protect lives, property, and the environment. So the idea is the more time that we spend, more time and funds. So I overheard that you have been successful for drift funding. That's awesome. So that's that mitigative work that we want to do. And the payoff that they're seeing when we're talking about business cases, that it's often $1 to $7 or $11 of payback that we get for every dollar spent on mitigation and preparedness compared to the recovery and response costs. So it's well worth our effort and our time to be doing that. Obviously, it doesn't matter how much we mitigate or get ready for disasters, there's always going to be a response component. And particularly nowadays, when we're seeing how our climate has changed and is going to continue to change, we're seeing a higher increase in terms of frequency of disasters and also the severity and the unpredictability about it. So how we actually see where our 4 phases come into action, we often compare it to the level of effort and the amount of time that happens. So right now we're kind of like in this normal, life is normal and it's as we know it. We're preparing, we're mitigating, and then this event happens. And then we kick into this high amount of effort that happens for a short period of time until we stabilize the event, and that period is called response. After response, once that event has been stabilized, we start trying to work from that interruption of life towards either the idea of a new normal, or often we talk about nowadays as a building back better. The way that those efforts are structured across that timeline, there's also a multi-jurisdictional response that happens in British Columbia and how emergency management looks as a structure. So one of the things that is critical for us to understand is that often it is the local authorities that are first to feel that incident. And so it becomes a bottom-up approach. So we see that there's that site response that then kicks into some sort of local authority, local government response that might include the province. And then once we start including the province, there's a variety of different ministries or subject matter experts that we would be bringing in all the way up to the federal government. So in other words, support's provided based on the size and scale and complexity of the event. And so in other words, as it's needed. And all this stuff is guided by the legislation. In our case is EDMA, so the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. And the EDMA came into force replacing the Emergency Program Act, and that was back in the fall. So one of the kind of catch-22s to EDMA is it took a very long time to develop. And now we have the act in place. So that tells us the what, like here's what you're supposed to be doing. But the province has yet to give us the regulations, and that would address the how you're supposed to be doing it. What they have told us, though, is that you have to have emergency management plans for an all hazards approach. You have to have plans now for the preparedness, the mitigation, the response, and the recovery. It used to just be response that we were asked to have plans for. So that's evolved. We need to have risk assessments for all foreseeable hazards. That's also evolved. And interestingly, funders like DRIF only give us funding for natural hazards. So it doesn't take into consideration technical hazards or hazmat hazards. I mean, there's a whole other breadth of cyber hazards. So the province hasn't quite caught up in terms of the funding, but it's coming. We're now also responsible as local authorities for having business continuity plans. And those are the plans that allow us to continue to deliver services that our residents pay for if we are ever impacted by a disaster. Two other things. One is the multi-jurisdictional emergency management organization. The coolest way I heard it talked about was a mojito. Sounds way more fun. But the idea of that is it's an optional framework for local authorities to come together and collaborate on the responsibilities that are assigned to us under EDMA. So that's what Village of Kaslo and RDCK have been doing forever. But once we understand what the regulations are for a mojito, we're going to put it into more of a framework that is written down, that's recognized, that's understood. Obviously building that collaboratively with the different municipalities. And the final one is the consultation, collaboration, and cooperation with our Indigenous governing bodies, where we're now required to consult with them for all phases of emergency management on any activities that we're doing. And so at the essence of it, it means we need to understand what our hazards and risks are. We need to understand how to mitigate and respond to those risks. We need to have plans that help us understand how we continue to offer those services, so that business continuity to the residents, even if we have an event that it interrupts us or a disaster. We need to understand who's responsible for the response. We need an organization to be able to deliver on the response, but also those three other pillars of emergency management. So mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And then we need to understand who is appointed to look after all of those different aspects. So how that plays out between regional district and the village of Kaslo is essentially emergency management in the regional district is a shared service. So that means that municipalities can choose to be part of that service or not. In our case, we have 6 participating municipalities with for emergency management that together share the cost of the budget. So in 2025, the costs that went to requisition, which means to taxation, was it was just under $1 million for emergency management. And of that, Kaslo pays $26,620 for 2025. So what that actually means at the end of the day, if you have a home that is $500,000, excuse me, it means that on your property tax, within that, it would include $35.50 to be part of the emergency management program. So that work is delivered by 6 core staff, 6 core emergency management staff, and as well as just-in-time staff, I think of them. So the orange staff that are on this slide are cost recoverable by the province. So it means that in my budget, and consequently the part that Kaslo pays for as well, there's a $0 line for anything to do with response. My job as EOC director is to make sure that everything that we do for response in service of our residents doesn't cost them an extra dollar on their property tax. So all those costs get approved and expensed back to the province. So you'll see we've got 3 emergency program coordinators. We have a disaster mitigation and adaptation senior advisor, and they are responsible for the Fire Smart program. And one of our emergency program coordinators is responsible for the Emergency Support Services program. So to deliver on the broader program, we've got a set of responsibilities that are split between the 2 local authorities. So Kaslo as a local authority, regional district as a local authority. And what we do is we separate some of the tasks that are part of what we need to deliver under EDMA. So the key kind of bits and pieces in here, because it's a slide that's a lot to take in, is that there's those 5 key components around governance, risk assessment, preparedness, response, and recovery. And some of those are still being determined through EDMA because we haven't yet received the regulations. So right now we're working, we've got a rudder, but we don't totally know where we're going yet. So we're working as best we can in terms of understanding how we work together for governance. There's a piece around a risk assessment. Village of Kaslo will soon be invited to participate in a joint application for a DRIF expression of interest. We're just in an expression of interest point at this point to do a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment to understand those risks. And that's going to be part of the requirement. I'm trying to get ahead of it, knowing that everybody's going to be needing to do one next year. So I'm trying to get the funding kind of lined up right out of the gate. We've got these emergency management plans that we have to develop. And so the regional district is responsible for having plans that we could assess that would be overwhelming Kaslo's immediate response, whereas Kaslo might have some specific plans that are, let's say, is it the Esso as I'm driving into Kaslo, where there's that big propane tank? Like if that propane tank exploded, there might be some basic planning that would need to do within the village boundaries there. Immediate response would be through your fire department. Let's say it started to require more resources, then that would extend to having the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, activated. So it's working together and collaborating. And then finally, same kind of thing around preparedness, response, and recovery. What's in the village boundaries is something that the village is responsible for, yet at the same time, we're always there to support. Because it quickly can overwhelm local resources. That's the whole point of a regional program where we can step in with more resources and support. So at the end of the day, when I'm talking about it, it's a team approach. I think of emergency management as like we're all in it together. And that's a little bit about understanding where the RDCK's role is. So we're really going to be in a response mode to understand what's the information that is accurate, that's verified, and that we can use as intelligence to help us make decisions to mitigate any threat or threat I'm using or incident, so stabilizing the incident. And that's through a prioritization exercise, looking at what resources we have, allocating those resources, and then focusing on making sure that we can get people back into their homes if there was an evacuation order, and making sure that they've got critical infrastructure in place so that when they go back to their homes, they actually have a life at least close enough to how it was pre-disaster. So that really takes that coordinated approach, and it's always going to vary depending on type of incident that we're looking at. So this is this. I'll give you the spoiler alert, kind of coming right into this one. It's about consistency. There was somebody earlier in the meeting, counselor, who was speaking about that public trust piece. And during an emergency, it becomes really critical for local authorities that are working together to have that consistency between what the regional district is saying and what the municipality is saying, and vice versa, just to make sure that we're increasing and maintaining that public trust, and which typically will also have a correlation to the safety. So increase in trust, increases in safety. So looking at the left column here, there's something called a policy group, and Mayor Hewitt would be, so a policy group is a temporary group that comes together for any policy related decisions that are going to be required by the Emergency Operations Center. Mayor Hewitt would be part of that, as she's the representative on the RDCK board, and she would be pulled into a policy group if we had an event that involved Village of Kaslo. She would also be the one signing the state of local emergency, but the key thing to think about is that in that particular group, and Mayor Hewitt in this case isn't someone who is either kind of stating what the operations are going to be or directing them. So it's really a policy-based and strategic policy perspective. And then Mayor Hewitt might be the spokesperson for the village, that the Emergency Operations Center would be providing speaking points to, and making sure that we're all on message. So where the rest of council comes in is echoing and making sure that you are able to provide updates based on verified information from known entities or known agencies. So that might be the RDCK, BC Wildfire Service, and sometimes the RCMP or SAR might have messaging as well. So it's using messages that have been verified and then amplifying those. So it's also a very good time to be a spokesperson for preparedness. So Village of Kaslo uses our Voyant Alert, or is part of our Voyant Alert system, where you're able to get notifications either on your app, on your phone, by text, or by landline on the telephone. And that's in addition to the door-to-door delivery of evacuation orders that we do if an area is specifically on an evacuation order. So the whole point is amplifying any messages coming out of the EOC. And then from an EOC standpoint, what it looks like for the RDCK is we're responsible for staffing it, making sure that we are response ready at all times. We would typically be responsible and always for writing up all the paperwork for declaring a state of local emergency or local recovery period. We would be issuing evacuation orders and alerts and resins on behalf of the village in coordination with the village, issuing notifications, so through that Voyant Alert, and then making sure that there's that coordinated approach liaising between the different governments, as well as having that public information component if ever it was needed in the village. We did several last year during the 2024 wildfires, and then making sure that we get that $0 response cost impacting taxpayers in the regional district or in one of our participating municipalities. And then what that looks like in the field, we're making sure that we're managing the site, we're coordinating resources, we're informing back up to the EOC from that standpoint, we're managing access to areas that are under evacuation order, and then we're also running the emergency support services program and reception centers. And that was a bit of a mouthful. Don't know how long it took, but I'm happy to take your questions.
It's okay, Dan. I didn't give you a timeline, but because I thought this was important for us to hear. So I wasn't keeping you, didn't have you on a clock.
Thank you.
Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Leetwood.
To the chair. At our ESS meeting yesterday, we talked a lot about the fact that, last year Kaslo was the community that Argenta came to. So we were kind of on the other side, and there were a lot of gaps in not necessarily the emergency response, but the expectation of how to help those people. We had the reception center where we could give them the support services, but there were so many other things like childcare and all those kind of things that sort of fell through the cracks. And so how would we address those situations?
Well, I think every situation will be unique. So I think the most important thing is people need to take responsibility as much as possible for signing themselves up for BCID before the season starts, getting a profile created on the Emergency Support Services website. And those are the two first things that they need to do if they get to evacuated and get to a reception center. And then finally, if they are evacuated, to go to the reception center or use the online system to be able to register and request support. So when it comes to childcare, there are times that if there is a need that we hear about through the reception center, that can be arranged. So if it didn't get arranged last year, it's a good learning for us to just something to make sure that we're monitoring from as best we can from the EOC to make sure that those needs are being met.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So then the other side would be if there was an emergency in our community. And so the conversation was, where do we find our council emergency plan? We're going to get, obviously, the RDCK, who we pay the service for, is going to have a broad plan, but what's a specific plan that we in Kaslo have? Are we supposed to be developing that ourselves?
It would depend. I'll say, sorry, through the chair, it would depend potentially what kind of hazard you're talking about. But if it is within, let's say, the village boundaries, the Village of Kaslo does have a responsibility under EDMA to have a certain degree of plans. And I'm very happy to work with the CAO to help make sure that the plans are in place that are needed in Village of Kaslo.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Anyone? Okay. I do have a question. You used one acronym that threw me. I looked through the whole document to see, because you'd been really good about spelling it out and then using the acronym HRVA.
So HRVA is a hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment or analysis, depending who you talk to. But that is, so as emergency managers, that's what we call it. What's currently in the legislation, they are talking about it as risk assessments. But the idea is, how do we identify what our hazards are and what the likelihood of them happening, what the likelihood or of potential impact is going to be, and then making some proposals about how to mitigate those. And that is connected to the characteristics of the particular community, which is the vulnerability piece. So a hazard only is néfaste. Sorry, I'm getting a French word, is negative for us. We're vulnerable to it. And depending who we are, we have different types of vulnerability at different times. So that becomes part of the HRVA as well.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Through the chair. So my question is on business continuity plans. So am I right in making the assumption that when say business, it's business of the local government, i.e. providing services that local government provides?
Through the chair, that's right. So business continuity. So for me in my department, what I need to make sure I can do is to continue to deliver emergency management services regardless of any impacts that are experienced by my team. So that could look like a power failure, internet failure, another, let's say, health outbreak that impacts my staff. I need to be able to continue to deliver emergency management services. So within EDMA, this is new. Local authorities are required to develop business continuity plans. At the same time, they haven't given us the regulations yet. So while they've said that we're going to need to do this, they have not yet told us what those plans are going to need to be. So we're in kind of like this gray area that we're still compliant as local authorities, even though those haven't been in place. But there's potentially, it might be more of a question for your CAO that you may already have a lot of those plans in place.
You have a supplemental?
Yes, through the chair. So if the local government is looking after being prepared and mitigating any hazards that are associated with their own operations, is there any requirement under EDMA or any other legislation that the village looks to preserve, say, the essence of the community? And I'm talking churches and essential services that are provided by private individuals, non-elected, non-village staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, there's no requirement under EDMA, but that could always be something that either those institutions have business continuity plans, like there are businesses or nonprofits that will also be encouraged to develop business continuity plans. I know Deb Borsos was kind of concerned and thinking about that for specific NGOs, particularly in Kaslo, and particularly NGOs that act as hubs to other NGOs. And specifically encouraging them and helping them to develop business continuity plans. So while it's not required in legislation, I think a business continuity plan is great. It's good for my house too. Like how do I continue my life if ever I needed to leave? So it's that preparedness piece.
Any other questions? I've got one. It might be a bit tricky, but if there are multiple concurrent events or emergencies in the region, how are they triaged, right? If you've got an event in another part of the regional district and you're lacking sufficient staff, how, and ours is the last emergency, are we just out of luck, or is there, or are there plans, right? That we would be looked after as a municipality?
Yes. Well, first I'll speak about wildfires of 2024. We had 2 electoral areas have fires start at the exact same time. We had 3 municipalities all get affected at the exact same time with wildfires as well. It was the first time in the regional district's history that any municipality as a whole was either put on alert or on order. And last year we had 3 simultaneously. And what I can say is we were able to deliver from 1 electoral area to having 2 electoral areas and 3 municipalities. So the way that we're able to deliver that is by scaling our staffing. So we're able to reach out to resources at the provincial level. And also we're building a relationship with RDEK and RDKB to be able to have interjurisdictional support across our regional district. We're thinking about that as an incident management team for the Southeast. It's something new. It doesn't exist in BC yet. We're trying to pilot it. And so we're very excited about it. So what I would say is triage usually happens as a first come, first serve kind of thing, that we start to work through whatever's coming in. At the same time, if we see an area that's requiring resources and the risk is a lot higher, then we reallocate resources. And we're able to pull on those different requests from across the province to be able to make sure that we can deliver service across the regional district, regardless of the scale. I'm going to knock on some wood at the same time, because last year was a lot and we were able to do it. And this year could also be a lot. And I'm sure we're going to be able to do it again. And each time we have these events, we're learning.
All right. Thanks very much for that, Dan. All right, I think that if no one else has questions, thank you again for being willing to come and explain that to us. Hopefully we won't need you. Other
that's
than
fine.
more education. And thanks for being willing to sit through the rest of our meeting.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you probably next week.
Have a great night.
Okay, good night. Right, so I'm gonna call for a brief recess right now, so can I, do we have to? Where's Robert on there? Do we have to make a motion to recess? And if we're just taking a quick break, or
Chair can just.
say we're taking a break? Okay, so we'll take, is 5 minutes enough? Okay, all right, we'll come back at 7:20. Reconvene at 7:23, and we're going to have a presentation on our projects from our manager of strategic initiatives, Ian.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind giving me the mouse.
If you must, eh?
There we go. And we can just check online, people online can see screen share. Okay. Yes, you're good. Okay, great. Right. Okay, so lots of things on the go, as you're well aware. This is sort of an update of the presentation that I made with Rob back in March when we were talking about the budget. So we'll go through each project one by one and give you an update on that. So the big one that Steve Gavin at night is the Kemble building. It's only been for like 4 years now. But we have actually broken ground, so to speak, or broken walls down. So the main floor washrooms are now under construction. So the washroom has been ripped out and it's going to be an accessible washroom built on the first floor. So that is underway. We've been in constant contact with the tenants to keep them informed of what's going on, and they've been really cooperative so far in understanding. They're excited to see the upgrades, especially the HVAC, so they get reliable heat in winter and cool in summer. And next week, they're going to be starting to bore holes through the wall for the ventilation pipes and the electrical and sprinkler system. So that'll probably be the most disruptive for the tenants, as there will be quite a bit of noise and some vibration associated with that. So we'll try to accommodate them as best we can. So that work is going to take 2 weeks for the boring and then another 4 to 6 weeks for the HVAC installation and sprinklers. And then we also have to look at getting into the attic to remove vermiculite installation and install sprinklers up there. That probably won't happen until the fall, because I was speaking to the sprinkler contractor today, and they really have no interest in working in an attic in hot summer weather.
Yeah.
So that's fine. The other project that we're trying to get going is the structural repair. So there is a tender out right now for structural fixing of the cracks, and there's things like the lintels, which are the stone over the window, and the sills at the bottom are cracked, indicating the building has settled over the years. So we need to get those all shored up. And some areas where, especially in the corner of the buildings, where you can see visible cracks going through the brickwork. So there'll be some strapping put on there to actually hold things in place, as well as some sort of epoxies and those kinds of things to inject into these cracks to prevent them from growing further. So we'll be a little bit late getting that the structural tender sorted out, because when we put it out to tender, we thought, great, we've got all the plans and everything we need. But then we started getting questions back, and we realized that the engineer hadn't quite done the thorough job that we thought they had in terms of quantities and locations of some of the repairs.
So we're gonna re-examine that and then, and update the tender information so that the contractors that are bidding on it we won't be getting apples and oranges back. They'll be bidding on the same thing. So, probably a couple of week delay there. And also finalizing the windows, tender. We're getting a mix of, windows replaced and windows restored. So the windows that aren't facing, the streets will get replaced. Because it's much easier to be able to do that. There'll still be wood frame, double pane windows, so we don't have to have the storm windows on there. And they'll look really nice, like match the existing. And then especially on the upper floor where we have those additional inlays in the windows, so the additional grid work and that kind of thing, those windows we'd like to get restored, because that's part of the heritage character of the building. So they are single pane windows, and the caulking contains asbestos, so there has to be special precautions done to take the old caulking out and restore those windows. And there will be new storm windows put on the inside. Instead of the ones that were put in the 50s or 60s, which are kind of flimsy and thin, these will be more robust storm windows that will actually provide some insulative capacity for the building and be easier to open and so on. So that tender is being finalized, and we'll hopefully get that out beginning of July for work to be completed in the fall. We were successful in getting the grant extended until the end of the year, but it is a hard deadline for that CERB grant. The nice thing is, since we haven't spent a lot of the money so far, it's been earning interest over the years, so we're going to put some surplus funds towards it. And as you can see there, about 1.24 million. Earlier this year, the council did approve going after an ETSI grant for $75,000. But so we looked into that further, and they don't fund capital improvements. So even looked like it might be a good fit for the Innovation Center. They said no, they really want to focus more on the operation of the Innovation Center. So once the building is actually completed, we would actually get some startup funding potentially through that program to be able to fund, from an economic and business development point of view, that Innovation Center and co-work space. But you can see we have a number of funding sources available, including our own reserve funds from the Kimball Building and surplus funds, and the CDT based and charge up grant, which is going towards the energy efficiencies in HVAC. So anyways, it's good to see that project is finally, we're actually seeing some physical work happening. And yeah, it's been sort of frustrating, but it's happening. So yeah, that's the reward on it.
Oh,
So you
you're sorry to interrupt you, but there's somebody waiting to be admitted, and I can't see who it is.
Lorraine Sims.
That's,
Nope.
Sorry. So as I mentioned, so completed water upgrade design, engineering design, building permit, we have that, and then the grant extension. So there's still a lot of deliverables remaining there. And as we go through each of these stages, we then assess, okay, how much did that cost and how much money do we have left? So we know that we may not get everything on that list done on our current funding, but we're going to try and get as much as we can done and optimize and fit things around this to get the best value for it. So we don't want to do it all at once and then get over budget and run its program.
Counselor,
Through the chair, you have accessibility improvements underway. Can you talk about those?
Yes, so the main floor washroom is being converted. So right now there's two small washrooms and they're being converted into a single large accessible washroom. And so that's the main accessibility improvement in this phase. But the other one is going to be how do we get people from ground level up to the main level? So one of the plans had an elevator kind of tacked onto the exterior of the building. And that's going to be a fairly expensive solution. And really to do it right, respect the heritage character, that would probably be a future grant down the road. But one of the things that we want to explore, you can see on this slide here, is putting a lift in the front entranceway that will at least get people up to the main level. So we see the top drawings are what's existing there now. And that the cover for the stairs was put in, we believe around the mid 1950s. And that was put in for weather protection, obviously, and because of snow and ice falling off the roof, that provides a bit of protection. So it's not original to the building. So the proposal would be in the lower slides there, you can see we would reconfigure that so it comes straight out instead of coming down. So now it creates a bit more of a grand entrance to the building. And then there will be a staircase
either on the right or left side, and then a lift that will take you from ground level up to the main door. And the main door, that landing that is currently on an angle like that is going to get replaced and fixed. So this is one of the ones where we're not sure if we can afford to do it on this phase, but accessibility is a really important aspect. So we're going to see if we can get, if there's any other accessibility project funding that we could possibly tap into to make this happen. Because we don't even have an accurate costing yet. When we first were looking at the project, we figured we could get a lift installed for about $60,000. But then looking at the whole structural aspects and what we'd have to do to that front entrance, the costs go up. So this is probably more like a $200,000 to $300,000 option. Yeah, once we get our core stuff, the structural, the windows, and the core elements of the building, then we see how much we have left over for the next phases. So future update to come. Any questions on the Kemble building?
Actually, yeah, well, on the windows, will the replacement ones, I know you said you were meeting with Bob Inwood. Will he be consulting to see whether they're gonna be in keeping with the heritage character, since it's only the exterior on that building that has the designation? So, and
Yeah. Yes, so it will be in keeping because we won't be replacing the windows that have that heritage values, the ones that have the mullions, I think.
Yeah.
Grids on top. So those ones we want to get restored. So the other ones will be similar looking. So that's why we would want to get them replaced with wood frame, not cheaper vinyl. And then, so really they'll be like for like.
okay,
It won't be that historical glass necessarily, but it will be something that will function well and look really nice. And also the paint colors will be something that we'll consult with Bob Inwood on as well. Is actually, we were meeting with Bob Inwood on the city hall colors, so that was the purpose. But if you see even on these renderings here, the building looks fantastic with dark color window trim, and some of the historic photos have that. So that's probably what we're going to aim for, is a bit of a refresh look there. And with those new windows, they will look like that. So you see the historical windows on top. You shouldn't be able to obviously tell too much the difference of which one's which.
okay, thank you.
And next is City Hall. So Anita, it was meeting with Bob Inwood. So just to confirm the colors of the City Hall painting. So he actually helped select the colors when the building was painted in 2014. But he did have some new advice as well, just on heritage colors that are kind of approved for use, especially in British Columbia. The color we've chosen is Vancouver Green, which is a nice, rich, deep green color. And Simply White, which is a white color, but it's a little odd. And the white is the same as the color was painted in 2014. And the green will be just a slightly darker green than what's on there now. So it should look really nice. And it will give us a bit more life in terms of, the oxidization of the colors, because you can tell the green is faded a little bit. So that a little bit more darkness and richness will help the building look nice for years to come. The schedule is from the painter is they may start as early as next week. So someone else is top. Losing here. Okay. Next slide. And the council audiovisual, as you can see in the results here, we're being watched. And there are other things that are planned, but not involved in that part of it. But the exterior, it'll be great to see that happening in the next few weeks. That will be kicked off. And we did also get some heritage specifications for the repainting as well for the type of finish. So the contractor will have to follow. Front Street Park, another one that has taken us a little bit of time to complete, but we're really close now. And if you've been down there and seen the Water Street's wall side, that's looking really sharp, and the landscaping is going in. So it's nice to see that one wrapping up. We've got a picture there of the Front Street side. We'll be getting that little strip of paving done. There will be some line painting done where the accessible parking stall is going to the loading zone. And just some finishing touches. So the lighting has been put in and it's working. You'll also notice there was a bit of improvement done on the steps down to the hotel side as well, where some additional patio screens were put in to make that more level.
And then the only other thing remaining, once we get landscaping done, will be the water fountain. I reached out to a couple of different plumbers and getting varied responses. We have to determine where the drinking fountain will drain to on the inside. So there's just a few things to work out there, but it's still on the to-do list. So at least we'll have the physical aspects worked.
Councillor Leathwood?
To the chair. Those pieces of wood, like, they're not, like, what was the purpose of that? People kept asking me. Well, what are the?
Yeah, they are, I would have to, I can't really read the mind of the architect designer, but they are a design element that brings forth, logging
Oh.
and, yeah, and timber and that kind of thing. So those are gonna be, they're not gonna be quite to that density that they are there, so, we have been working with Brenton Industries, the contractor, because the architect also has a certain vision for it too, so that's not quite it. So there's finishing touches to be done there, and, there'll be some gravel or decorative stone going in, as well as the bush and tree plantings. So we'll wait until it's done. Then we can ask questions.
Right.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, yeah, I was thinking those were just placeholders and then we're gonna put potted plants in holes. Good placeholders, more actually.
Yeah.
But the other side of that sign, which is the one you see from the street, it's a blank wall.
Yes, and so there will be some bushes planted in front of it, so it will be screened. Okay, so yeah, there's no plan for that. Thanks, the arena. So we have completed the kitchen feasibility study and the accessibility feasibility study. So we have a kitchen design, which includes all of the fixtures and so on, and that would be going in the upstairs, in the sort of the corner part of the main lounge area. And the HVAC design is being completed, and as I was discussing with Councillor Leathwood, that will include an air handling and filtration system. So if the facility was used for as refuge in summer during wildfires, the air would be clean inside. So that would be it would meet some of that requirement. Still to be done is the installation of the HVAC, which will eat up most of that budget, about $240,000, and the backup power, and that still has to be designed. But that too will take about $70,000 of that the budget. So what we don't have the money for is the accessibility, because it will require an elevator. There's a couple of options that we're looking at, so we'll have to get some additional funding for that project. CBT has been fairly positive so far on that some additional funding might be available for through the program that we applied to originally. So we're following up with them once we have some more guidance on the costs for that. But right now, the option that's looking the best would be an elevator in the lobby with a hallway going towards the lounge area.
Just got a question for Councillor Leathwood. Who is that? Is that the general?
I'm not sure who that is.
Okay, I thought it was either Grant or Tudor, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Just like, I don't. Councillor Leathwood.
Through the chair. I'm happy to note, as I was saying to Ian, that there is an HVAC system, because when I brought that out the other day, they were insisting it wasn't part of it. But Jesse also mentioned that possibly there could be some CRI funding for some of this stuff, because the arena is critical infrastructure. So something we can maybe look into to address some of those things that we still need to get money for.
Yeah, that'd be great. Right, next is the Illinois Amphitheater. So nothing much done on that so far. So maybe in the fall, we'll be looking at getting some of the design engineering done that's currently in the budget for this year. And as you know, that's working towards getting the project ready for a construction grant. So that's TBD, and council sure will be seeing some of the design ideas once we get to that stage. So hopefully that will start this fall.
I do have a question on that one. Are you working with the board at the KLHS
Yeah, yes, they will be consulted on it. I know I've been talking to them for a few years about getting this project. You know, seems to be a pattern there.
Yeah.
I don't know who the CAO is, but. Yeah, they will definitely be involved in that, and I think they'll be excited to see it actually.
Good.
And that will include a replacement of fence along the sidewalk and removing some, probably reconstructing that sidewalk as well. There we go. Waterfront development. So we had 22,000 in the budget this year for looking at the wharf. And the province, just at the end of March, gave us a hard deadline for the rural dividend fund that we had been holding much money for since 2018, that we needed to spend it by June 1st. So we did. Well, we spent most of it. We couldn't spend all of it because there was about 60,000 there, and we spent about 30,000 to try to get as much as we could done to make this project ready for the next intake of possibly REDIT. Which and one of the eligible projects under REDIP would be taking out creosote containing infrastructure that's in the water. And we could get up to $1 million for that. So we were able to get an environmental management plan done, archaeological assessment, and hazardous material assessment. So those three things are key for us to move forward with getting a grant for $1 million grant to remove the structure and get our permit process underway for environmental permits through Ministry of Environment, Section 11. And we'll also need a wildlife act permit as well, because there is an osprey nest down there too. So we'll have to make sure that that's handled sensitively. So that project is almost complete. Just waiting for some final reports. But we were able to kind of get enough of it out the door for June 1st. And we do have a bit of money through Community Development Fund sitting in that project in deferred revenue too. So there is a bit more money we have left if we need to get a bit more done for the permitting process. So that'll be a nice one. Try that one up with a bow and have it ready for our next grant application. Hopefully will be received. And yes, you can see the little remaining will be the permit application, and you can see the lovely condition. Not great. Kaslo self-development, as you're aware, we had the open house a couple of weeks ago, and it was well attended. So $60,000 carried forward from last year. The Rural Resident Attraction Fund is helping us with that one. So we'll get that money spent too. That's another grant that's been sitting around for a little while. And any overruns are eligible under the Provincial Housing Initiatives grant that we received last year as well. That was $140,000, and I'll have other ways that we're spending that in many slides. So the current status of the project is the consultant has finished the background report, obviously taking in all of the community input on the early directions. And we'll start to see some sort of draft planning of that for that vision towards the end of summer. So the rules remaining will be the assessment of transportation, water, and sewer, so the capacity of the existing systems to service the area. Options for housing, where we might be able to fund development and further engagements. There will be another engagement opportunity in the fall once these conceptual plans are done. And that's good to see that moving along. And housing initiatives, as I mentioned, we received a grant of $140,000 from the province. We've got $125,000 to spend this year because we just had some money committed to the other projects there. So the deliverables there will be the housing needs report, which is done, and amending the zoning bylaw for secondary suites. That's done. It says what's done. Oh, deliverables remaining. So completed housing needs report and residential zoning update. We did those last year. Housing needs report was through the RECA. So the deliverables remaining. We're going to be putting together kind of a package. Or for RFP to consulting company that might be able to do all of these deliverables for us, and we would then work with them to do a servicing bylaw, development cost charges or amenity cost charges bylaw, source control bylaw, which is for our wastewater system, and assessments of our water and sewer capacity. So how much more population can we support with our existing infrastructure?
So that will go out as a package, should be going out in July as an RFP, and we'll see what responses we get back, and hopefully that project can get done by the end of the year. And there'll be quite a bit of community consultation involved in that process too, and First Nation consultation.
I do question, no, go ahead, Councillor Bird, I'll let you go first. No, go ahead.
The DCC/ACC bylaw.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so development cost charges and amenity cost charges. So we don't have something like that in place right now. And the purpose of that is if you're building a new development, especially a new house or something, then as part of the fees you pay an infrastructure fee that goes into our capital reserve funds. So you would pay, say, $5,000 towards the water system, and then another few thousand towards roads or something like that. And that would all go into our reserve fund to help us with future infrastructure costs. So it's the idea that development pays for development. So if we're getting new houses that are now using our infrastructure, that there's kind of an upfront fee because everybody else has been paying taxes into that over the years. So an upfront fee that would be, the cost of developing the house. So a new house is going to cost $300,000 to build. So there might be $20,000 of these costs to be able to hook up to the water system, have road access, and these types of services. Amenity cost charges are more to do with parks and recreation, playgrounds, that kind of thing. So these are all things that obviously council will have a lot of say in as to what you would like to see and what's appropriate for council as we move forward with that process.
My question, Ian, was, do you anticipate that with the new federal government and their outlook on housing, that any of what we're proposing, it meets provincial requirements, but do you have any inkling as to whether it might impact what we have to do?
Well, because municipalities fall under provincial legislation in terms of how we operate, it really it comes from the province.
Okay.
But the federal government can't really directly tell a municipality what to do, even though they've been accused recently with some of their funding programs that they're meddling a little bit. So obviously, to access those programs, the federal government has certain targets and things that they would like to see met. But in terms of legislative requirements, it would be up to the province to do that. And obviously, they did quite a bit of that last year to Bill 44 and stuff.
Yeah. All right.
Next generation 911 is updating our mapping and GIS and creating public education for how people can use 911 and to make sure that 911 services have access to the latest and most up-to-date information to be able to dispatch emergency services out. So we've already been doing a bit of work, just updating some addresses, making sure that information gets passed on to GIS department to the RACK, working with them on that. And one of the things that we'll probably be bringing to council would be a bylaw, which might be grouped in with those other bylaws, which would be a street naming bylaw for things like our laneways and alleys, which don't have names. Just to end where we have like Fifth Street, which has two distinct sections, like calling it 50 South or something, so that when there's a dispatch, the emergency services know where they're going. So everything will be addressed appropriately, so that it reduces the confusion. So to name streets and create addresses, that is something that has to be legislated through bylaw. So that's something that may be coming later this year. And the RACK has also asked for a chunk of that money. I think it's in the order of about $6,000 or $7,000. I'd have to check that, but it's not big enough. That's going towards their GIS department to help them update their system as well. Because it's their GIS department that then uploads all that information to the 911 services.
I have a question on that one too. If we're creating new addresses, I guess how much it's going to create a bit of work for the owners of those properties where their civic addresses may change. I guess, but it's probably more of a question for CAO Baker. To give them ample notice that is going to occur, because it'll be quite a chore for people to change it on their driver's license and all of their information where the physical address is required. So
Yeah.
I would say there shouldn't be too much of that. I mean, if we're looking at, say, Fifth Street and we're creating a Fifth Street South, that's not too hard of a change to make because the street number would remain the same. And then our alleys and laneways, there are not a lot of houses that front on the alleys per se. So they would still be like any avenue as opposed to whatever the laneway behind.
Okay,
But if we do have, say, things like carriage houses,
Yep.
which already have
Right.
some, then those might get an address associated with the laneway. And again, right now, they don't have their own address separately, so it makes sense.
okay, thanks.
So this is one of the drift. Oh, there it is. Disaster Resiliency and Innovation Fund. So you're right, Council.
Yeah.
It's innovation, not infrastructure. So this is the first of that project, flood and erosion mitigation plan for the Kaslo River. So we completed quite a bit of work just earlier in 2024 to get the rest of the sections done. So that planning work started in 2016. So now we're basically 10 years later, and we're going to look at the next phase. It's what is the next thing that needs to be done on the river? So we'll get an engineering assessment done to identify potential sites where armoring and riprap and flood mitigation or where flood risk is highest. And then we'll focus on getting a design done, archaeological assessments to make sure and of course environmental to make sure we're meeting all the requirements. And then again, we end up with a project that is grant ready for a structural grant to actually implement that in, say, a couple of years' time.
So how far up the river does like a plan go, like right to where our water path is? Or,
Yeah, it would go just beyond the Trailblazers Bridge because we
Okay.
have the municipal boundary, and then beyond that, there is a piece of land that the village actually owns, which is the former power company.
right,
Yeah. So the village has that, so we want to take them to take a look at that as well. The focus will be within the municipal boundary because we have less jurisdiction, obviously,
Right.
outside of the municipal boundary for getting things like permits, because then getting into
Right.
more situation.
Right.
But yeah, for that budget, we want to look at as much as possible. So we've already commissioned some drone aerial imagery, so that'll be happening in the next few weeks to be able to give that to the engineers and then be able to do their work and identify the sites.
Great. Councillor Bird?
Yes, through the chair. It's always concerned me about the Kaslo River being monitored, like for log jams, debris coming into the river. And I still don't know if there's any procedures or regular like things that we do to check on the flow of the river. And I imagine there might be like Bluetooth devices that could be put in the river that when they don't spin as fast, if it's suddenly slowing up, and somebody would get an alert, somebody could go and check to see if there is becoming a little pond developing because of barriers in the river, but I don't know how we are monitoring the river, because the river is what's gonna flood us if it's not the lake.
Yeah, if I may answer that question first. So there is a monitoring station upriver of the village's water intake, and that's actually a federal station. And I think you can even go online and access the latest flow data. So you can go back a few years and download data if you want to. That's the only one that is available close to us, but at least it's something. So I don't know if it's not something we've explored, and maybe something we could bring up with the engineer about having like a Bluetooth monitoring station or something down by the bridge. But I don't know who would be responsible for monitoring that, since we don't really have that expertise on our public works crew, for example. But it's a good idea. I think definitely we've seen debris floods and that kind of thing happens.
Councillor Leekwood?
to the chair. Over the years, we've had, YRB has always sort of kept an eye on it. And, there's no formal agreement, but they've always sort of kept an eye on it. Because they're always like their area goes right to Denver, I think, isn't it? So kind of a loose sort of monitoring by that. I mean, I don't know if they still do it, remember? They used to do that for us.
But they won't clear it long.
No, but they'll, watch it and
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, perhaps the RDCK emergency management plan that we were just looking at. Perhaps we could provide some feedback in that that might be something that we'd like to see them look into, to see if perhaps they'd be the people that would get that alert that would say, hey, the flow is lowered, as they're would be in charge of the response. They would probably be ideally situated to be the people getting that info.
And most likely the problem area would be outside of the municipal boundary.
Right.
That's right.
For sure.
Yeah.
That plays into our next project under GIF, which is the Source Water Protection Plan. And even this, it does have an element of the Kaslo River in it, because our intake, our auxiliary intake and pump station is on the Kaslo River. It's down the highway, as you know, so that will be looked at as part of this particular project. And this is where we get into the HRBA. So who remembers what HRBA is? Hazard risk.
Hazard risk. Yeah.
Now we want four things for this project. So we'll be hiring an engineer to analyze the watershed things upstream of the Kemp Creek Dam. And because really we haven't had it assessed since the washout happened in 2020.
Yeah.
So again, we've commissioned drone aerial imagery up there, so we can see if there are any of the log jams that could potentially cause or pose that threat. And then we also have our creeks. You can see the 3 creeks on the map there. They're really just with springs. They're not providing us with a lot of volume of water, but we do have water licenses for them that date back to 1900.
Oh.
And they all feed into our reservoir, the little blue triangle, rectangle you can see there. And then that pipe goes down to the Kaslo River and then back up to our water treatment plant on the other side. So there's a lot of exposures there for in landslide or in wildfire, cuts things off, that kind of thing. So that would be an important aspect to look at for the source water protection plan. And it's also required by Interior Health that we have the source water protection plan as part of our operating permit for our water system. So great to get that funding to be able to get that box checked off.
I got a question on that one as well. You said you're gonna have the drone look at the material in the river. Is it gonna look at, because there was the burn, which has caused both of the incidences. Is it gonna look at that as well, or is that something that we would need to coordinate with the RDCK since it's not within our boundary?
Yeah, I've asked them to look at the burn. So they're not going to look at the entire burn site, but they're going to go up the valley to see if there are other areas where logs have come down from that burn and accumulated in the valley and could then be washed out in an event.
Right.
So that is part. They won't be going all the way up to like the top of the mountain or anything, but the area that is most vulnerable is going to get that aerial survey.
I just wonder if we should inform the regional district or at least the area director, so she's aware that, because if she recognizes that there's activity in her area that she maybe should have been made aware of at least.
Okay.
I think that would probably be a good thing to do. Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, it's also the tenure of the community forest. So, and they may have already done some kind of hydrological assessments in that area. So there's communication with the community forest out of this one.
Yeah, I'll double check if that is part of their tenure. The Kemp Creek, because it certainly is on the other side. The Cane Creek is part of their tenure, but I think it stops at the top of the ridge. But I'll double check that. I think you're right.
Brooks Creek and Brooks Creek's in there, like the springs.
Okay, right. Yes, you're right. It's on that side too.
I think there's a
Sorry.
cut over there from 2010.
Yeah, that is theirs. Transportation network plan is done. Thank you for approving that at the last meeting. So that's something we can check off the box. We received grant funding for that and the Climate Action Fund. Questions about that one?
I guess the only question would be, there were many recommendations in that. Is that just something that, was there any direction coming out of the plan that we should be revisiting it in a timeline? And that again might be.
Yep. That would be, Yeah, I think that we something to discuss with the CAO Baker.
Yeah.
I know there was, one of the, sort of quick projects that could be done would be the reduction of speed limit in Lower Kaslo.
Right.
And that would require a bylaw of the council to set speed limits, so that would be something that, council could provide direction on. Maybe go through the plan and, get to any councillor to make a motion if they want to see something move forward from that plan to look at more planning for that particular aspect of the report. So we can report back on it as to what would be involved and what the cost would be. And of course, part of the goal of the plan too was being able to apply for grants for getting some of the implementation done. But things like the lower speed limit would be relatively easy to do that because we're just talking about signage and this is the paving project. So we talked a fair bit about that at the March meeting. And we have 800,000 in the budget this year for a paving program. And I've been working on getting specifications done, taking photos and putting it into our GIS system about exactly what is going to get paved. So that should be able to go out before the end of this month. So you get the project done. Just looking at the map here, we have Belfour Avenue and Arena Avenue, which we know are in very poor condition. And then Front Street and Second Street down by the wastewater treatment plant. Should be able to get that done. We're not sure if we'll have enough to complete the Second Street by the ball field. That is also an area where there could potentially be a waste of the sewer expansion. So the caution there is we don't want to pave the road if we have to rev it up to the sewer clinic. But there is obviously a very poor condition of the pavement there. So we'll at least have to get it patched. Presentation's almost done, so that's good. Because we're just getting the tender out now, we might be looking at spring 2026 to get the paving crews in. But at least we'll know we'll have a price locked in and we've got the money set aside. Get that done. LED streetlights, that's a work in progress. So every now and then we give Fortis a list of streetlights to be replaced, and they come and replace them as part of the maintenance program. We do pay for the streetlights, of course, but the goal is that this year we'll have them all finished compared to LED.
There, some of our LEDs, people have been complaining about whether it's the angle or that there's not sufficient shielding, that it doesn't illuminate their homes too much, and it's more of an intrusion than the old street lighting.
Yes, so we haven't come up with a solution for creating a shield around that would deflect it, because Fortis doesn't want to install that on there. Although Fortis has also said that they are experimenting with that in other municipalities, so they may have a solution for us. Right now, oh, thank you. How did you know? That's the sign of
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, at our last AKBLG, I spoke with Blair from Fortis about those shields. They said that they were testing, I believe, in the Creston area. And what they were finding is that wildlife were nesting in them. And so it created an additional issue that they're now having to look at. And so it seems like they're slowing down on that effort, because now they're starting to look at the other implications of putting these shields up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the one thing we are doing is requesting the lowest wattage when they're going into residential areas. This is a 31 watt bulb, LED in there. So although there might be a bit of glare, it's not as bright as the old orange glow. So bulbs. And we are actually mandated to replace those because we call it the ballast inside those sodium lamps is now contains PCBs and it's now illegal for us to even have them. So they do need to be phased in.
The wastewater treatment plant is another project to get the project ready for a development grant or big grant. So we do have an opportunity for a big grant later this year. There will be another intake of the Strategic Priorities Fund by UPCM. So there might be an opportunity to put another application in for a $2.5 million project. So we did try through that program a couple of years ago and were turned down. But sometimes when you go back again and again, they start to pay attention to the project. And we are in the process of getting our new operating permit from the ministry. And they are proposing some more stringent guidelines for our effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. And to meet that, we would need to have these upgrades. So they're willing to provide us with a letter of support. Fortunately, not in order for us to get, but a letter of support that might help strengthen the grant. If you'll recall, when we got our money for the UV upgrade at the water treatment plant, our Interior Health provided this support letter, and that really strengthened our application, saying, hey, the village really needs to have this. So if we get one from the Ministry of Environment, similarly saying, yeah, the village really needs this, then hopefully we'll have a better chance at getting that. So we've been in touch with the engineers. The timeline of getting the design done is going to be fairly tight to meet that September deadline, but they think that they should be able to come up with something for us. So stay tuned on that one. And hopefully we'll get a strong application if council is on board with doing that, because this is obviously we just learned about this opportunity a couple of weeks ago that grant program was looking at. And the water treatment plant, we just completed our tender for the construction of the piping and installation of the UV treatment system. Came in just under $400,000, which is nicely within our budget, so that's great. So next council meeting, that'll be coming to council for formal award, because anything over 250,000 has to come to council for that. But in the meantime, we'll start negotiating with the successful bidder or the lowest bidder, and make sure that everything is aligned so they can start the work. The work probably won't happen until the winter, because it needs to happen during the lowest flow period, lowest demand at the water treatment plant, because they need to be able to operate just off of one of the 3 filtration trains during that time. So they'll be looking at either it's the end of this year or by February 2026, which again meets our grant deadline and lease the money. So it's really good there to have that one almost wrapped up. Pressure reducing valves. This one we might get started by the end of the year on the final design. Probably won't get tendered for this construction season, but it's definitely one that is an important one for getting PRV4 replaced and getting a design for PRV2. So that one, and some of these other projects settle down a bit and be able to focus on getting that one ready for next year. And our asset management program. This met with the consultants again yesterday. And so they're underway looking at our inventory for some of our buildings, our stormwater infrastructure, and parks and recreation. As you know, in the past, have been focused primarily on water and sewer, which is really important. So now we're starting to look at some of the other natural assets and that kind of thing that we have. And we're making some progress there and getting more of this information online on our GIS system. And that will feed into our financial plan as well. So we have a whole dashboard that we can generate reports, and that helps us determine our 5-year and even a longer range financial plan for what we need to invest in. Because as you heard from CDO Baker, we need to be investing more in asset renewal to be able to keep up with things, and also be able to have that evidence to apply for more grants to. Right, and that's my presentation. So I can answer any other questions.
Great. Are there any other questions before we move on to our next item? Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Got a lot going on.
Yeah, just a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to give this back to here.
Were you getting a little antsy without your mouse over there?
Yeah, I got to back.
So, recommendation is, we didn't have any recommendations coming out of the committee of the whole, so we'll rise without reporting at 8:12. May I have a motion for that, please? Councillor Brown and Councillor Lang. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And we'll move into business, and I'll give Councillor Brown a moment to declare his conflict and step out of the room.
As I am president of the Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association, I will declare conflict and step out of the room.
All right. Let's give the councillor a moment.
Lost my agenda for the regular meeting.
Oh. Right. Well, we'll get, oh, there we go. There's Councillor Leekwood. Sorry. Oh, no problem. All right. Welcome back, CEO Baker. We can see you again.
Still awake?
Did you want to speak to the report at all before I read the recommendation, or shall we have discussion?
I don't think I need to say anything. I think I can just let council run with it.
Okay. All right, Councillor Leekwood.
To the chair. I'm just wondering, now that we've contracted cleaning the washrooms out, you know, which is an extra expense this year. So this isn't reflecting that increase in fees.
So if you were looking for the fees being charged to KBSA to include all or a portion of the cost of using the campground operator to clean the washrooms, it's not talked about in the staff report. That's your observation is correct.
Supplemental?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. So the recommendation then is that the village's agreement with the Kaslo Baseball and Softball Association be amended to increase fees by 3% for the 2025 season. By Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? Those in favor? That motion is carried. So that brings us to the 2025 council meeting schedule, and with revisions being suggested. So are there any questions on that before I read the recommendation? So the recommendation is that the 2025 council meeting schedule be revised as detailed in the staff report titled 2025 council meeting schedule revised, dated June 10th, 2025. By Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leekwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. And for the benefit of the public, that is taking out the meetings of July 8th and August 12th. So we will only have one meeting each for July and August because of lower volume typically of meeting materials. And 8.3 is a temporary street closure request by Trans Rockies. recommendation, but I do have a question, is that 9 parking spaces on Water Street across from Front Street Park be closed to the public from 8 a.m. July 9th, 2025 until 10 p.m. July 10th, 2025 to accommodate a medical team for the single track 6 mountain bike race. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Billard. You have discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
the chair. So that's not gonna affect, because that's during the week. Those days, so that's not gonna affect any deliveries or anything. Because if deliveries go through Water Street,
It's just the parking spot.
just the parking spots, right? Okay, so it's not the actual, okay.
My question though is there is a handicap parking spot there. Can we somehow shift that handicap spot just to the other side of that barrier? So there is one that allows access for people who want to use that to go to the hotel or any other businesses on that end of the street, on that end of A Avenue or Front Street rather. That was my only concern with that.
Through the chair, I don't believe the village owns any handicap signage that would be able to create a temporary handicap parking stall. So if council has concern, we could modify the resolution so that the handicap stall remains. Council believes the impact is possibly low, then could just proceed with the recommendation as presented.
Council have any thoughts on that? Well, that was the only thing that I saw. I have no problem with the request. Otherwise, I was just thinking that loss of that parking spot could have an impact. Councilor Burt?
Through the chair, there is, behind the hotel, a handicap spot that's closest to Front Street Park, but that would be the hotel's private property.
Yeah.
There, so if anyone was using the hotel is already offering a
Yeah.
handicap spot.
In one spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if nobody wants an amendment to it, we'll vote on it as it is. And any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And then just the late item, which was my report and a copy of the trust board highlights. And noting that the next meeting of the trust is at the end of July in Belmont. So then that is our last item of business. So the recommendation now is that in accordance with section 91A, a part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. C, labor relations or other employee relations. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land and improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. And L, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purposes of preparing an annual report under section 98 annual municipal report. And that persons other than council members and municipal officers be excluded from the meeting. And so then are you going to make that motion? We will make the motion.
Yeah.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Leaford, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Motion is carried. So we're now recessed at 8:21.